Alex Pretti was 37 years old when his life ended on a cold January morning in Minneapolis, but long before his name became part of a national conversation, he was known for something far quieter. He was the person families trusted when machines beeped through the night and hope felt thin. An intensive care nurse at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Alex spent his days and nights tending to veterans whose bodies carried the long-term cost of service. Friends and co-workers said he had a steady presence, the kind that made people feel less alone even when outcomes were uncertain. Alex did not come from a background of confrontation or extremism. He grew up in the Midwest, close to his parents, who described him as thoughtful and curious from a young age. He was the kind of child who asked questions, who wanted to understand why things worked the way they did. That curiosity followed him into adulthood, shaping both his career and his personal relationships. He stayed in regular contact with his family, checking in often, sometimes multiple times a week, even as work schedules pulled him in different directions. Those close to him said Alex had a strong sense of responsibility toward others. Nursing was not just a job, it was an extension of who he believed he was supposed to be in the world. He believed in documentation, in transparency, in the idea that when people are vulnerable, someone should be paying attention. He carried those values outside the hospital, too. Friends said he was the type to stop if he saw someone hurt on the side of the road, to intervene verbally if he thought someone was being treated unfairly, and to record situations when he felt accountability mattered. In the weeks leading up to January 24, Minneapolis was under visible strain. Federal immigration enforcement had increased sharply, bringing Customs and Border Protection agents into neighborhoods where residents were unaccustomed to seeing them. Protests had grown steadily, fueled by fear, anger, and uncertainty. Alex followed the developments closely. He talked about them with friends, not in an ideological way, but from a human one. He worried about escalation, about misunderstandings, about how quickly things could go wrong when people with power and people without it collided. On the morning of January 24, Alex was not headed to work. He was moving through the city when he encountered a federal operation unfolding on Nicollet Avenue. A crowd was already forming. Voices were raised. Phones were out. For Alex, this was not unusual behavior. Friends later said he believed documentation mattered, especially when authority was involved. He began recording with his phone, standing among others who were watching federal agents push people back from the street. The situation intensified quickly. Witnesses later described confusion as agents moved forward and chemical spray was deployed. People coughed, staggered, tried to regain their footing. In the middle of this, a woman was pushed to the ground. That moment would become pivotal. Video footage shows Alex stepping closer, his attention fixed on what was happening in front of him. To some observers, it looked like concern. To others, it may have looked like defiance. The difference between those interpretations would later become central to the case. What is not clearly visible in publicly released footage is Alex presenting a weapon before agents moved in on him. What is visible is Alex holding a phone, his posture upright, his focus forward. Seconds later, he was forced to the ground by federal agents. A struggle followed, brief and chaotic. During that struggle, Alex's legally owned firearm became involved. Shots were fired. The sound echoed down the street, cutting through shouting and confusion. When it was over, Alex Pretti was dying. The official response came swiftly. Federal agencies described the shooting as justified, framing Alex as a threat who resisted officers. For Alex's family, the statements were devastating. They did not recognize their son in the description being offered to the public. They knew him as careful, deliberate, not reckless. They knew he carried himself with responsibility, including legal compliance. He was licensed to carry his firearm. He was trained in de-escalation as part of his nursing career. The image painted by authorities felt alien to those who loved him. As news spread, co-workers at the VA hospital struggled to process what had happened. Some learned during shifts. Others received messages from friends and family asking if it was true. Many said the hardest part was imagining Alex in that moment, surrounded by chaos, doing what he had always done, paying attention, only for it to end violently. Public reaction grew rapidly. Videos circulated. Analysts slowed footage frame by frame. Civil rights groups raised concerns. Minnesota officials questioned why state investigators were initially blocked from the scene. A medical examiner later ruled Alex's death a homicide, confirming that it resulted from another person's actions. That ruling intensified calls for accountability. For Alex's parents, grief unfolded alongside disbelief. They spoke about their son's kindness, his dedication, his belief that people deserved care. They described late-night phone calls, shared meals, and future plans that would never happen. They did not frame Alex as a symbol, they framed him as a human being whose life mattered beyond the circumstances of his death. As protests expanded across Minneapolis and into other cities, Alex's name was spoken alongside others lost during encounters with law enforcement. Healthcare workers attended vigils. Signs emphasized who he was, not how he died. The question repeated again and again was simple and haunting: how did this happen? Midway through the unfolding story, one detail began to stand out more than any other. If Alex had not stepped forward when he saw someone pushed to the ground, if he had not been filming, if he had simply turned away, would he still be alive? That question sits at the center of the case, because it challenges the boundary between observation and intervention, between civic responsibility and personal risk. It forces a deeper look at how quickly ordinary actions can be reinterpreted as threats when authority feels challenged. This is where the story pauses, not for answers, but for tension. Because what happened next did not bring clarity, it brought layers of complexity. The Department of Justice announced it would open a federal civil rights investigation into Alex Pretti's killing. The investigation would examine whether constitutional protections were violated, whether the use of force was justified, and whether federal agents acted within the bounds of the law. Such probes are rare and often slow. They do not promise outcomes. They promise scrutiny. Behind the scenes, tensions escalated between state and federal authorities. Questions emerged about evidence control, about body camera footage, about jurisdiction. A federal judge ordered evidence preserved, signaling the seriousness of the dispute. For the public, this confirmed what many already suspected: the full story had yet to be told. Psychological experts pointed to the dynamics at play. Crowds under stress amplify fear. Officers trained to anticipate danger may interpret sudden movements as threats. Bystanders with caregiving instincts may move toward conflict instead of away from it. None of these factors alone explain a fatal outcome, but together they create conditions where misinterpretation can be deadly. Alex's death also raised broader concerns about federal operations in local communities. Residents questioned why heavily armed agents were operating in civilian spaces during protests. Legal scholars debated standards of accountability. Families watched closely, knowing the outcome could shape future policy. Through it all, Alex's loved ones carried their grief quietly and publicly at the same time. They attended hearings. They spoke to journalists. They returned home to empty rooms and unanswered phones. Their loss was not abstract. It was daily and permanent. As of now, the investigation remains ongoing. No final determination has been made. The questions remain suspended in time, waiting for conclusions that may never fully satisfy those who seek justice or closure. What remains is the story of a nurse who believed in care, a son who stayed close to his family, a man who stepped forward when he saw someone fall, and a moment that changed everything. If stories like this matter to you, stories grounded in verified facts, centered on the human lives behind the headlines, this is Wombs In. Stay informed. Stay critical. Subscribe to follow ongoing investigations as they unfold, because accountability depends on attention, and attention is something no authority can take away. Thanks for watching.